So for those who don't know, I've been kind of taking a break this month. Right, and you just made an hour-long Deltarune video. I said kind of, don't fucking judge me. Anyway, since I'm not actually capable of doing nothing and making simpler videos is my idea of relaxing and recovery, I decided to download a bunch of game demos from June's Steam Next Fest and give my opinions on them in no particular order and pretend I'm doing something worthwhile with my time. I don't really have a better lead up for this video, so let's all just take a look-see at some upcoming games, pretend I'm qualified to give consumer advice and have some fun with it. Sound good? No? Well, I'm doing it anyway. Off we go. Okay, so I was super excited to try this game out. It's actually the only one on the list that I knew about ahead of time. I'm on record as loving games like No Straight Roads and Hi-Fi Rush, both of which I've embarrassed myself playing on livestream since, well, honestly, I just have all the rhythmic sense of a concussed brick. So I was very prepared to go into this game and immediately suck ass. And you know what, viewer? I actually completely did. Have I ever mentioned my powers of clairvoyance? Developed by D-Cell Games and published by Playstack, Unbeatable takes place in a world where music is illegal somehow and you fight cops because cops fucking suck, just like they do in real life. The demo actually starts a bit in medias res. I mean, technically it starts with a tutorial, but you know what I mean. With our heroes somehow surviving crashing an entire train, and even more miraculously, not getting tetanus from the derelict shack they decide to hide in. See, this is the most unrealistic part of the entire demo. I can buy that everyone is named after musical terms and a pink-haired girl can beat up a Congo line of blue-clad pigs, but the idea that nobody even scratched themselves on this flashing hazard sign of a building, that, is where I draw the fucking line. Also, there's some subplot about being framed for kidnapping Quaver, the resident lolly, and something about her parents in an old lighthouse. I don't know, they're doing the you'll have to buy the game to make sense of it all thing that a lot of demos do, but I am intrigued, so I guess it worked, you sneaky fuckers. The absolute best part of the entire demo is Poco and Apoko, who are like Team Rocket by way of panting and stalking. They are such massive cunts, and I love them so much, I cannot wait to beat their smug prick faces concave in the final game. Overall, I'd say the style is probably the demo's strongest point. We only get snapshots of the main characters at their lowest, so none of them are really especially likable right now, but I'm looking forward to finding out what the fuck and why. If I did have to criticize it, which I legally do, it's in the contract I signed with then an actually big problem with the demo right now is that the action doesn't sync up with the music and you're kind of forced to rely on your sight, which I believe is a cardinal sin in this kind of game and can get you shot in at least 12 countries that don't actually exist. Seriously, I know I have shit rhythm, but I played both the combat and the weird batting practice minigame, and the latter was so out of sync with the music it felt like a hate crime. The music is really good though, and they have time to fix these issues, so I strongly recommend they do. And I do recommend you give the game a look if you enjoy rhythm action beat-em-ups. I love that this is an actual game genre. We don't have a concrete release date yet, at least at time of writing, but it is planned to release sometime this year, so be on the lookout for that if you liked what you saw. Okay, on to the next game. Alright, stop me if you've heard this one before. Once upon a time, magic happened and a sort of nature-y themed group of good guys kept it and the world in balance, and everything was great until they made a mistake and broke something important, and this led to the rise of Duke Douchebag and his army of technology-themed soldiers, who declared himself the arbiter of all things good and outlawed magic and fucked up the good vibes of the universe forevermore. That is, until a small group of rebels come forth to violence their way across the land until a solution can be found. That's you, by the way. You're the bringers of violence-based solutions. It's safe to say that it's not the originality of the story that'll draw you to Abselum, just as it wasn't for me. No, I find myself recommending this game for the pure gameplay catharsis of it all. Developed by Guard Crush, Supermonk, and Dotemu? Fucking hell, how many developers does one indie game need? Anyways, brought to you by all those people, Abselum is a roguelike side-scrolling beat-em-up game that I really liked and have already wishlisted. The game plays most comparatively to, I want to say the Golden Axe games, but without the janky movement and artificial difficulty so endemic to old arcade games because they were designed to bilk you for every last quarter ever minted in the history of America. Instead, it has the much fairer difficulty associated with roguelikes and other games where your strength is dependent on randomized upgrades you get every run, like the slightly dour love child of Hades and Castle Crashers. I realise I'm probably not doing a great job of selling you on this game, so let me be clear. Abselum is the only game on this list that I am recommending purely on the enjoyment of the core gameplay loop. You pick your character, starting out with either a dwarf with a gun, or an elf lady whose blades eat souls or something, and run off to mow your way through who and whatever stands between you and Duke Dastardly, with the resources you collect along the way used to permanently upgrade yourself to keep getting stronger every time you die, and and Tree Mummy here yoinks you back into the mortal coil, only to send you back into the meat grinder with some debatable helpful advice and a fond slap on the bum. And that's not to say that the music or story or character design or any other component parts aren't good. They range from great to perfectly serviceable. They're just not the big reason I'm hoping to buy this game as soon as it drops, whenever the hell that'll be. We don't have a release date yet, Steam just says it's coming soon, which could mean fucking anything. But I'd honestly prefer the devs take all the time they need to bring us the most polished final product they can. Please just check out the demo if anything I've said makes this sound even remotely interesting. I'd genuinely love to see this get more attention. The demo only goes up to the first boss, but it already has a lot of replayability and, like I said, it's fun and satisfying to play. Also, you can unlock a cyborg ninja lady after a few runs and she has some mysterious backstory thing going on, so consider that some extra incentive to give it a look outside of just, you know, making me happy. Come on, first hit's free. For those who don't know, I fucking love horror media. I'm a massive baby about it and usually have to engage with what I'm watching from behind a pillow or something similar, but I do enjoy it. I enjoyed enough that I made a video on what I think makes horror work, which you can still watch after this video if you're especially bored or like my content for some reason. I don't know, I like to think I have some thoughts worth listening to. Luto is the game I think is probably the most well known on this list because the demo dropped a while ago and people were doing let's plays of it and gushing all over the place, which I only found out about after the fact because I don't tend to watch live streams or let's plays. It is also already out. It released like a week ago at time of writing while I was working on my Deltarune video and I didn't realize until I sat down to write this fucking script. I was debating dropping entirely, but, well, I also wanted to talk about it and needed another game, so here we are. Skip to the next segment if you don't want to hear about it, I guess. I also need to preface my thoughts by saying that recommending Luto based on the demo is tricky, not just because it's a demo and therefore by its very nature transient and subject to change, but because the demo is actually a PT situation where it's not meant to actually be a look at a section of the finished game and more of a vibe check for what the game could be, so take this with a grain of salt, okay? Okay. Yeah, so the Luto demo is fucking phenomenal and I hate how effective it is. The demo begins in some guy's house, a house that is creepy and liminal even before answering the phone transforms it into a Frankenstein's monster of eerie rooms and disturbing implications. It kind of reminds me of the Dollhouse segment from RE Village, just a lot more minimalist. An important component of horror that I think goes underappreciated is restraint, the application of control to an experience that allows the inherent tension of the situation and the atmosphere to do their job of winding the viewer/player up like a spring and maximizing the actual application of scares, and this is something Luto does so horrendously fucking well. I made the mistake of trying to eat a taco bowl while I was recording the demo and it went almost entirely forgotten, because most of the time I was legitimately too fucking tense to put down my controller and take a bite. Luto's atmosphere and sound design are so good that I didn't even realize just how little actual horror was in this fucking thing until I got to the end. And absolutely none of that was a criticism, by the way. I may be a baby, but I've still consumed enough horror media to be somewhat accustomed to and slightly inured to its genre conventions, and this demo still had me sitting there with my butthole clenched for far longer than it should have taken to actually finish the fucking thing, because I kept needing to stop to take a breath and urge myself to keep going until I got to the unsatisfying ending. Oh yeah, the end of the demo was pretty underwhelming, by the way. I won't spoil it, and it wasn't quite the level It Was All a Dream would be, but it was a close second. Though that criticism honestly pales in comparison to the fact that the game had me ready to piss myself in fear at the sight of a guy in a fucking bedsheet. So the ending being slightly meh is something I can forgive. If you have played the actual game, please tell me if it's as good as the demo implies. I really want this to be good. I'm feeling optimistic, but I'd really rather play it safe than sorry because I've been fucked by promising demos before. Thinking of you, Bloomtown, for the first time in a fucking year. One of the things I tried to do when picking demos for this was to get a decent variety of games, not just to make the video more interesting, but because I'm trying to expand my horizons and try new things. And detective games are something that I've just never really had any interest in. But this one has a dragon and dragons are cool, so that made the choice pretty easy. I mean, it's a furry type dragon and not a fantasy type dragon, so it's not quite as fucking hilariously amazing as the premise could be, but I'll take what I can get. I guess furries are some people's fantasies now that I think about it. Whatever, we're getting off topic. I'm going to avoid spoiling too much because mystery and all that, but to give the briefest of summaries, Dragon Detective is the story of Seven Noxley, a miasma dragon and detective who is recruited by a pair of young foxes to help them discover where their mother vanished off to, and that's what you do for the whole of the demo. If you're not someone who's bothered by furry art, the game has a rather charming and expressive presentation, and the interpersonal dynamic between Noxley and the kits is pretty cute. There's a bunch of world building and lore tidbits sprinkled throughout the dialogue, but it's rarely intrusive and it helps to add to the verisimilitude, even if the immersion does take a bit of a hit when Noxley pulls an as you know Bob and mentally explains his process to himself. The gameplay revolves around using your 6 senses to gather information from your environment, those senses being sight, smell, touch, hearing, taste, and magic, the last of which is used to gather more esoteric information like how recently the wood for something was harvested or experiencing the echo of a person's final moments. You then use the information you gather to build clues, and then use those clues to form hypotheses from which you deduce, dear boy. It all works fine, I think. Having not played any detective games before this, I can't really say how well it holds up to the rest of the genre, but I think it does the job, okay? And yes, utilizing taste does mean you lick a whole bunch of things you definitely shouldn't. This is actually where I got the most enjoyment from the game, because the other characters can generally be counted on to react appropriately, and it's absolutely hilarious that you canonically just go around running your tongue over everything in your environment. A non-comprehensive list of things I've licked in this game include a clock, several doors, military rations, a workbench, a blood-stained floor, a non-bloody floor, several boxes in a basement, and a doctor examining a child. Noxley must spend a fortune on mouthwash. The game is brought to us by Sungazer Software LLC, and I honestly might check out some of their other games because I did enjoy the writing in this one, and their other 2 games on Steam are both RPGs, which are usually more my speed. I did wishlist the game though because the mystery and world building are intriguing, and I also really just want to see how many people I can freak out by licking future prime suspects. I don't know, check it out if it sounds interesting. The game is slated for release on the 21st of August this year, so look forward to that, I guess. Okay, moving on. Hey there, random person probably looking to gaming to escape the mind-melting boredom and mundanity of your 9-to-5 bread-getting existence filled with annoying coworkers and random assholes. How would you like to pay for the privilege of taking on another job where you deal with annoying coworkers and random assholes, but these ones have superpowers and even more ways to inconvenience you? Doesn't that sound like the best thing ever? Okay, facetiousness aside, while I simply do not understand the appeal of job simulator games, and never will because they bore me to tears, I actually do quite like Dispatch. Brought to us by Ad Hoc Studios, you play, well, essentially Iron Man if he was an office worker because his suit was destroyed and needed a new job, and that job is to work as the dispatch agent for a group of super losers on their last chance because they all suck so fucking bad, and none of them respect you or each other, and we're off to a great fucking start, aren't we? I'll be honest, this is very far removed from my usual gaming preferences, so just like with the last game, I can't really say how much it holds up in the overall genre of job sim gaming, but it's also a strategy game on top of that, so I don't know if it even fits in there to begin with. What I can say is that the writing and character work is pretty good, and while I had my doubts, the gameplay is just active enough to not be an idle game, which is good because those bore my tits off. The gameplay loop of Dispatch revolves around receiving calls for help and sending the quote-unquote hero best suited for the task, keeping in mind their stats and personalities and all that managerial stuff that's more interesting than I'm making it sound. I don't have a lot to say because the demo is pretty short and a good third of it was cutscenes that were actually really good and full of good voice acting, and character work that made me actually want to get through the gameplay more to see what other story bits I could glean from the incredibly short runtime. I think there's definitely a lot here that people more into this genre of game would enjoy, so I recommend checking out the demo if you enjoy strategy, superheroes, and awkward encounters in the bathroom with your hot coworker. The game is slated for release sometime this year, but Steam doesn't say exactly when. Give it a look, it's not a terrible way to spend a half hour of your afternoon. Okay, so there was inevitably going to be at least one dud in this list, and Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and all of his carpenter friends, what a dud this turned out to be. Away From Home is a rhythm combat RPG game about this girl named Abby and her brother Michael, and their trip to a city, and that's about all I can tell you for certain because the demo was really stingy on story details and instead chose to focus on the combat and the character dynamics, neither of which are very good. The characters all vocalize in discount Simlish and none of them are all that likable, especially not Abby. The combat is mostly passable and revolving around using the arrow keys to attack, guard, use special attacks and use items, kind of like a less streamlined Friday Night Funkin'. The problem is that the bars tend to come in just way too fast and with too many in a row at once, even on some of the most basic enemies. But this is fine because they can barely hurt you at all, so the only real challenge is keeping your combo counter up so you can use your special, which is the only way to dish out any substantial damage. It's not super fun. Honestly though, my biggest problem is with Abby herself, who is just an unlikable bitch from the word go. Over the course of the demo, she beats up her brother for real during their imagination fight, insults everyone and everything around her, and also harasses this weird alien-looking kid named Joe in his gooning shack because he can teleport them to the city, and bullying him is the most efficient way to get that to happen. I'm serious, she beats him up for transportation often enough that her brother tells her she needs to stop. And Joe is a creep and a pervert who's obviously earned at least one ass kicking, but again, she canonically just keeps barging into his place and kicking his teeth in to force him to take her to where she wants. This isn't comedy or an earned punishment, she's just bullying him. The trailer implies a lot of wacky nonsense and some horror elements will be included in the final product, but based on the demo alone, I honestly cannot recommend this game to anyone who cares about having likeable main characters. Music was alright though. The game is slated for release on October 22nd if you're interested, I guess, but I personally can't wait to never look at or think about it again after this. Meanwhile, existing in sharp fucking contrast, Wonder Stars is a game I haven't stopped thinking about since I played through the demo on it because it is so weird and unique and anime in all the right ways and just fun. This demo was really fun. Developed by Paper Castle Games and published by Fellow Traveler, Wonder Stars is the story of Ringo, who lives with her kick-ass grandma and aims to be the champion of ki fighting. And to that end, you get sent on an errand to buy groceries, battle crabs with boxing gloves, buff surfing capybaras and local delinquents until a space furry named Wolf, Akira slides onto the scene, steals a shard of a map Ringo had in her phone charm, and derails her entire day as she's forced to run off to chase him before his ex-boyfriend shows up with space pirates, steals the map, blows up his bike, and fucks off into space to act as the real inciting incident. And to address the elephant in the room, yes, I do realise the art style is taking some rather blatant inspiration from one of the most famous anime of all time. The developers clearly have good taste and a lot of courage if they're willing to look this much like Sailor Moon. They're basically twins! This game is so full of personality and is just charming and fun, but I seriously need to gush about the combat system because it's so fucking cool. Combat revolves around the use of modifying words to change up your attack style, as well as to exploit enemy weaknesses. So say you have the word kick that does 2 points of damage. Well, you can then add super to add another point of damage, plus fire to add a burn effect, and then you can add fast to speed up the cooldown for the word selected, meaning you throw out a fast super fire kick all while screaming out the name like anime god intended. I love this so fucking much, it's like the entire thing was made to appeal specifically to me. It's so cool. There's also a mechanic centered on beating your enemies up just enough that they give up and befriend you, kind of in a rival's way, and that's how you gain extra words, and it's kind of a whole lot of fun. It adds a puzzle mechanic to fights. I cannot stress enough how much I want other people to play this demo just so I have someone to talk to about it. Please go give it a look, I am literally begging you. The game was originally supposed to release on the 1st of August, but it got pushed back to September 19th because the devs need more time to polish up the UI and work out all the bugs, which I really respect and support because devs should always take the extra time they need to ensure their game are as completed as possible, but also I wanted to play it so bad sooner, no! Anyway, please check it out. It's a fantastic use of your time you absolutely, definitely, most likely, probably won't regret. Besides, let's be honest, we're all looking for something to distract us from being productive a little bit longer. Have you ever looked at a game and just thought, ah, fuck it, let's see what this is about? Well, that was kind of my thought process when I downloaded Hirogami, which is a 3D origami action-adventure game about driving corruption and darkness from the world and restoring purity by folding yourself every which way. The demo only has one area and only takes about 10 minutes to get through, but it was a fun little time, and it's honestly one of the more visually striking games I've played in a while, which makes sense because it's being developed by Bandai Namco Singapore and therefore has more resources to work with than most would. There isn't a lot to get from it just yet. Hero was apparently depowered by the Blight, which is the corrupting force of evil so unnatural that it can even take the form of non-folded spherical objects. Oh, the deranged madness of it all. What eldritch horror has visited our fair crafted kingdom? I honestly don't have too much to say about the game at this point with how little there is. It's just kind of neat and I think you should give it a look. Also, you can fold yourself into an armadillo and roll into things, so that's pretty cool. Hirogami is set to release September 3rd, so give the demo a try and see if you can't have some fun with it. Insert paper pun here. No, wait, hang on. You know, sometimes I'm jealous of people who actually have nostalgia for things. I bet they get so much more excited for games that evoke a certain era of gaming than I do. Then again, that does usually give me a certain degree of objectivity that isn't tainted by that insidious rose tint, so I'm kind of cool with it. This has been a very roundabout lead up to say that Shrine's Legacy is, objectively speaking, pretty good. A solid 7 out of 10, a fun time to be had. Developed by Positive Concept Games and published by Indie.io, Shrine's Legacy is a 16-bit pixel art fantasy RPG designed to evoke the feelings of the SNES, and I think it does a fairly good job of that, though the SNES was before my time and I've only ever played a few games owned by older relatives. The game is set in the world of Ardemia, where an evil overlord was struck down in the past by the Sword of Shrine, but now he's back and it's time for the hero's descendant to step up and save the world. Huzzah! Yeah, so it's not the most original story, but I honestly don't think that originality is as important as vision and execution, and I think Shrine's Legacy pulls those off fairly well. The game actually starts with some cloaked mystery person lamenting at a grave before monsters show up for what feels like a supposed to lose fight, but one that you literally cannot fail before he falls off a cliff. And then we cut to the actual protagonist, some farm boy in an idyllic medieval village that probably has a sign out front that says, "This many days since we burned down," for a tragic backstory. It's actually really fucking funny because you get a whole 5 minutes of wholesome village life before some girl steals the sword for plot reasons and you chase after her, and the villain shows up to burn the village a literal minute after I stopped looking at it. I actually counted, it's kind of incredible. Don't worry, we lead the Dreadlord with the loudest fucking text box in the world away and the town is probably fine. I wasn't kidding, by the way, listen to this guy talk. He has presence, I'll give him that. Anyway, the goal is to collect the 8 elemental gemstones to power up the sword and re-vanquish Mr. Big Bad, and yeah, I know, stop me if you've heard this all before. What's important is that the gameplay is solid and the characters are fairly likeable. It's blatantly fucking obvious Sword Boy and Magic Girl are going to fall in love over the course of the story, something already lampshaded by insane alchemy granny here, but I don't hate their dynamic and they do have the beginnings of chemistry. Gameplay wise, you have weapon attacks and magic, both of which are used for solving puzzles and killing things what need be killed. Magic generally does more damage and has special effects, but uses up mana and you replenish your mana by whacking the aforementioned things that need to be killed with your weapon, which works pretty well. The game kind of feels like a cross between Oracle of Seasons and one of the mana games, so if that sounds appealing to you, I recommend giving the demo a look. It is actually quite a long demo too. I was doing minimal grinding and side stuff and I recorded almost 2 full hours of footage, so you're definitely getting your money's worth with this. Which I suppose is actually very easy because the demo is free. Either way, I can definitely recommend it to people who enjoy classic RPGs. So this is the only demo for a sequel game on the list, and to be honest, I only picked it up because it was the only gay demo I found, and I like gay things. I know, a real shocker. I never played the first Symbient game. I'd never even heard of it until now, and one of my friends who did play it says it was both very short and had very little outside of porn, so I don't think I ever will. I did check to see if there was a demo for the first game to see if I could compare the writing quality, but for some strange reason there was only a demo for the first game's DLC, which is so fucking weird. Anyway, brought to you by Hardcore Dev, The Symbient II is a yaoi / boys love / gay visual novel, they're actual words by the way, that centers on some purple-haired dude named Cassian, who stole something really important to his boss and fucked off to the middle of nowhere for reasons that aren't entirely clear, but I think have something to do with the strange pull he feels to somewhere in the planet's wilderness. Renaming himself Rodius, he then sets about trying to find the source of this pull, and while hiking one day, runs into this guy here, whose scent makes him mysteriously lose control of his body and feel like he's being drawn towards the guy, and okay, let's just rip the fucking band-aid off. He goes into heat, and then he faints, and then the guy nurses him back to health, reveals he's a monk in an old temple named Varga, says he thinks he can cure him, and then brings him home where his servant and housemate named Sinde disapproves. They get into an argument, Varga says Rodius will be sleeping in his room, and that's where the demo ends. Yeah, it's probably just going to be a porn game. The Steam page description says that Rodius goes through a change he didn't ask for, and it's obvious that he's going into space heat and has to mate with one of the 2 honky lads he'll be rooming with. The game really isn't as subtle or mysterious as the description seems to think it is. Gonna be honest, I've been kind of spoiled lately by really good visual novels, so outside of the art style and voice acting, which are gorgeous and well delivered respectively, there's kind of nothing here I haven't seen done better elsewhere. I should be more fair about this. There is nothing actually wrong with the way the Symbient II is written or produced thus far, and I am not casting judgment on anyone who enjoys it or thinks it looks good. It's just that I know I can play gay visual novels with better writing and more interesting character design for free on itch, so this basically does nothing for me. It's slated for release sometime next year, so check it out if you'd like, but outside of the two aforementioned strong points, I don't see anything that really makes it stand out unless you're really into humanoid alien twonks. Okay, moving on. But let's end this video on a high note, shall we? Developed and published by the folks at Meteor Magic Games, Erachina is a 3D platforming Metroidvania where you play as Bogey, an android built from the remains of an old abandoned aircraft who's being put through a training simulation by two people who either work for the government or a special operations unit. I wasn't clear on which. And no, your eyes do not deceive you, this game is definitely made by furries. But that's okay because we don't do prejudice on this channel, we just enjoy making fun of people sometimes. Erachina is honestly a really solidly designed game overall. Like any Metroidvania, you start with fairly simple traversal powers and combat before unlocking gliding, a ground pound, a double jump, and eventually even a gun. And some small issues with the gun's auto-targeting aside, the whole thing works pretty well. The controls are responsive and the movement feels good. Platforming in 3D can be really hard to nail down properly and really fucking frustrating to play if it hasn't been, so I'm honestly quite impressed with how well this demo pulls it off. As far as combat goes, you start with just your propeller blade melee attack and your dodge dash, but eventually you get that gun and gain a kick and the whole thing opens up quite nicely. Also, hot tip, locking onto aerial enemies will actually cause Bogey to rush towards them when you hit the melee button, so you don't need to try to navigate your attacks through jumping, and it's an actual lifesaver. Combat also isn't actually all that hard. I didn't die once and all defeated enemies drop health, so you probably won't find yourself on the business end of a game over screen unless you're truly hopeless. As far as writing goes, there's a potentially interesting story here. While it takes place in a simulation, the building itself is based off a former human base, and there's this whole thing about humanity having disappeared one day and what a mystery it is, and there's the skeleton of something good poking out here and there. Though your enjoyment of the characters is honestly going to depend on your tolerance for simple archetypes and basically competently written banter. They're not unlikable by any means, but I also have a high tolerance for annoying characters, and some people might find them less than charming. Also, Bogey isn't given a personality or characterization, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity. Finally, my biggest point of criticism for the game is that the level design is mostly boring and samey and it's easy to get lost in. I'm sure the devs have far more varied environments planned out, and there is some variation once you get to the office section, but overall it's just kind of mid at this point. Though if that's the biggest weakness the game has, then it's off to a good start. Honestly, I recommend giving the demo a little look. I really do think there's a lot of potential in this game. This is another one that's only labeled as coming soon, so you have plenty of time to get around to doing it, and it's definitely a longer demo. I played for an hour and a half and only finished like 30% of the optional content. So it's not a bad use of an afternoon. Also, Bogey is just really cute. Look at him! Look at his big old teeth! Definitely the best anthropomorphized plane I've ever seen. Well, that was fun. Maybe I'll do this again for the next fest. Thank you for indulging me with this fun little distraction. And for what it's worth, I don't judge anyone who had their interest piqued by any of these games, not even if it's away from home. They just weren't for me if I criticize them that much. Anyway, I will see you all in a much more serious video sometime soon. Bye.